This is actively happening in Virginia?
Oh, this is actually happening in a lot of states. The issue is that there's always some politicians sitting next to them that have convinced them that their little girl or their little boy or the person they love would still be alive if only we had this assault weapons ban. Red flag laws in just like a popular setting are the easiest ones for the other side to argue for. Because we all have this natural inclination that, well, yeah, of course, we don't want, violent, unstable, people dealing with significant mental health issues to be able to go out and buy a gun. That all seems infinitely reasonable. And on some level, that is, right? That narrative is reasonable. But that's not necessarily what red flag laws do. What a red flag law does is it says that, like in Virginia, if you have a concern about somebody, let's say you don't like your neighbor, and you can go to the magistrate. The magistrate is not a lawyer necessarily. They've just been appointed by the court. You can go to the magistrate and say, yeah, I think my neighbor is a real threat. That magistrate then conducts an investigation. Now, what are the guidelines or how thorough does that investigation have to be? There's not a whole lot of guidance on that. A lot of it's up to the discretion of the magistrate. And so now, without any court proceeding, without any trial, without any charges leveled against you, an emergency protection order is now issued. Law enforcement can now show up and confiscate your guns, right? And then you have to show up in order to prove why you deserve your property back and your rights back.
This is actively happening in Virginia?
Oh, this is actually happening in a lot of states. Now, the argument that they will say is, well, look at all these positive use cases where somebody that, had a mental illness, probably shouldn't have a gun, was potentially stopped from hurting themselves. I can acknowledge that. But do you not see how this couldn't be weaponized by a magistrate, how it couldn't be weaponized by somebody maybe going through a custody battle, by somebody that's going through any number of issues where they're just anti-gun and they don't like their neighbor and they got a magistrate that'll go along with it. This ends up being not only a potential infringement on your Second Amendment rights from a federal level, or in Virginia, it's Article 1, Section 13 of our Constitution. It's also a potential violation of Fourth Amendment rights, of First Amendment rights, because how are they going to, what are they going to use as evidence that you're a violent person and need to have your guns confiscated? Because here's the trick. If you're online making threats that you're going to hurt someone or shoot someone, that's already a violation of law. Mm-hmm. So now we've created this secondary category specifically for this issue. Now, one of the ways that they'll try to use to justify it is they'll say, well, this is going to prevent suicides. My friend, my brother, my whatever is struggling with ideas of or suicidal ideation. So I call up the magistrate and I tell the magistrate, my brother just called me. He's threatening to kill himself. I need an emergency protective order so we can go and take the guns. Now, if you're the magistrate at that point, the only evidence that you have is that somebody called up and said that. But what is every ounce of you screaming to do at that point? Issue the protective order. You want to help somebody. Okay. I've definitely been on the phone with friends that were right there on the edge before. Had I got off the phone with them and then called up a magistrate and said issue a protective order, here's what would have happened. Law enforcement would have showed up. They would have searched the house and they would have found all of the guns they could find. That doesn't mean they found all the guns. Just mean they found all the guns they could find. By the way, they left all the pills, they left the knives, they left the rope, they left the hose that you could attach to an exhaust, they left all the other mechanisms that somebody could potentially do harm to themselves. But now my friend, who called me up for help, maybe because he was dealing with stuff that he went through overseas, the next thing he knows is law enforcement came over to confiscate his property and leave, and he didn't get any say in the matter. Have you left him in a better mental state as a result of that? See, if you put all the emphasis on, well, we passed a law which says the police have to get the guns, so clearly that's going to be executed flawlessly, right? No. You hope it will. I hope it will. But I don't get to make decisions based off of what I hope will flawlessly happen. I don't get to make decisions with respect to your civil liberties based off of me, golly gee willikers, really hoping the government doesn't look for a way to actually extend its authority into ways that might be highly inappropriate. I have to first and foremost balance what it means to live in a free society. And there is trade-offs there. Because if we just want everyone to be safe, you don't need red flag laws. You need more prisons. Just put everyone in jail, padded rooms, 3 hots and a cot a day, you are safe. Is that the ultimate objective of a free society? No. So yes, I'm always going to give greater deference to your civil liberties. Now, you violate that, you violate law, you make threats, you engage in violent activities, I'll be more than happy to absolutely use the full extent of the law to throw the book at you. Because if you're a threat to innocent people, my objective at that point is I need to protect them. I need to protect this free, innocent person versus the person that is trying to exploit and hurt them. But the problem that we have with red flag laws is I think that most of the way that they're written are far too broad, and it invites certain magistrates, Commonwealth attorneys and everything else, or district attorneys, depending on your state. I think it invites a mechanism which denies you what we would generally consider the appropriate due process of law before we can not only confiscate your property, but deny you your civil liberties.
I agree with you. Do you think that there is a way to do it where that doesn't happen?
I think if I had more faith in the fact that the people that are passing these laws are only passing them because they can't get something bigger, maybe there would be a world where I would be more comfortable with that sort of authority, provided it was narrowly written and that there was far more protection for due process. But the same people that every campaign season I see show up and say, nobody wants to take your guns, then sit there as soon as they get power and they draft legislation that would make you a felon for owning a 15-round magazine. Not even a gun, not even an AR, not even an AK. You have a 15-round magazine that came standard with the Glock you bought, you're a felon. By the way, you're a felon for each magazine you own, right? So now I haven't just taken your gun rights. I haven't just made you a felon. I haven't just potentially put you in jail and put a bunch of fines on you. You know what you also lose in most states when you become a felon? Your voting rights.
Good point.
It makes me wonder sometimes if there isn't an additional motivation with respect to people carrying legislation that would take away the voting rights of tens of thousands of people in Virginia alone that they know probably don't vote for them.
That's a damn good point. I have not thought of that. Wow.
This is why one of the most important jobs I have in the General Assembly is I sit on Subcommittee 1 on Public Safety. I'm the chairman of Subcommittee 1. That's where all of the gun legislation comes. And I can tell you, that is a heartbreaking committee to sit on. Because you have to listen to some of the most horrible stories of people that were victimized. And it is, you feel an incredible amount of empathy for them and you want to help solve that problem. The issue is that there's always some politicians sitting next to them that have convinced them that their little girl or their little boy or the person they love would still be alive if only we had this assault weapons ban. If only we had this micro-stamping. If only we confiscated this. And you're sitting there looking at them going, you are lying to this grieving parent. And then you got to sit through it. You got to make the best arguments you can. And then you have to do what you know is the fundamentally right thing to do, which is to protect civil liberties. And then I walk over to my other committee on courts of justice, and that's where we work to make sure that the people that perpetuate these sorts of crimes go to jail for a long time or never come out. What's fascinating is the same politician that will be sitting next to that grieving parent telling them that if only we had this assault weapons ban, their child would still be alive, is some of the same people that will go into the Courts of Justice Committee and drop legislation to try to get the sort of people that killed their child out on parole earlier.
Another good point.
And that is the part where you will sit there with just absolute fury that the solution that they sold to this one parent was to deny people that did nothing wrong their civil liberties, not to mention the fact that their ability to protect themselves. We have over 1 million use cases in the United States every year of someone using a firearm to protect themselves. Those are victims that never were because they had a firearm. They're victims that would become victims if that politician had their way. They would especially become victims because that same politician goes into a separate committee and drops a bill to let the sort of people that engage in violent crimes out of jail early.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.